Okay, so this video is going to be for a brake actuator replacement on a second generation Prius. Mine's an 06, and as a caveat before we start here, I would at this point strongly suggest not trying to install a used part. I know it's tempting, that's what I attempted to do. I got one off of eBay for about 350 bucks, put that in, was getting a low accumulator pressure code, took it to both the Toyota dealer and a local auto shop, thinking maybe it just needed the computer automated brake bleed to be done. Both of those places told me that if I'm getting that code, the actuator itself is bad. So I had the eBay seller send me a replacement on warranty. I went through the whole job again and installed that one, and my gosh, by the end of it, I was still getting that same code. So I finally bit the bullet and bought a new brake actuator from Toyota. I was able to get it slightly discounted for about 1,100 bucks if you shop around the different dealers. I think retail is about 1,700 on it, so that's still a fair bit of savings. Also still a big expense. So yeah, so you don't have to end up doing the job 3 times like me. I would suggest buying a new one. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is disconnect both the 12-volt battery as well as the HV battery. So to disconnect the 12-volt battery, you can do it with these 2 plugs here. I've already got them loose. One there, one here. Okay, and that disconnects entirely the positive terminal. So that battery's disconnected. And then to disconnect the HV battery, you're gonna come around to this safety plug on the left side here, the orange one. You're gonna pop it up, so push upward on that clip on the top part of it, and then pull that lever down, and then pull the whole thing out. So kind of 3 steps is up, out, up, lever down, and then plug out. When it goes in, we're gonna reverse that, and it's an easy thing to miss. That final clicking the top part back, down, and in. Your car won't go into ready mode if you don't do that, so just a tip. Okay, I'm coming around to the front of the vehicle here. There are 3 mounting bolts for the inverter. We're going to disconnect this inverter. We're not gonna entirely disconnect it where you have to drain the coolant and everything. We're just gonna get it free and then kind of rotate it off to the side here so we can get in behind it where the brake actuator is. So to begin doing that, we've got 3, I believe they are 12. Yep, okay, 12 millimeter. We got 3 12 millimeter bolts, here, and one back behind the inverter is the tricky one to get to. If you have long fingers, you can probably reach it down in there. So you see this orange HV plug and then the gray. There's 2 gray wiring harnesses right behind it. And if you go just to the left of that and down, you should be able to feel that third 12 millimeter bolt. Okay, so those first 2 are easy. One here, and then the third one, I thought I'd give you an angle on kind of how I've got the socket in there. It's on it, so we can turn that, and there we go. I think it's loose. And if you don't have one of these swivel adapters to your socket wrench, you may want to get one. They're pretty handy. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is disconnect a few 10 millimeter bolts that are mounting both this bleeder hose, this connector, and this connector here. So you've got one under the bleeder right there. You've got one here on this bracket, and you've got 2 on this electrical harness here. Okay, so you move this out of the way. This bleeder hose just kind of drops down. I want to tuck that kind of out of the way as well. This one is now loose, but in order to get that disconnected, what you need to do, switch hands here. So there is that green clip. The way you get that is by sticking something right in the top there and then pulling up and out with it. There we go. And then it's just a normal plug. You press here, and there it goes. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do here is loosen up all of these 10mm bolts around the inverter. At this point, all 3 of our mounting bolts are loose, so this whole thing you can kind of pull forward just a little bit and give yourself a little more room to work with. Particularly, there's some of those 10mm bolts are way up, kind of back behind here. They're tricky ones to get to, but with just a regular 10mm wrench, I was able to reach up there and get them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and just a tip here, of course, it's always a good idea to keep the bolts you remove clearly labeled and grouped together. One instance where that is certainly true is these 10mm bolts for the inverter have a slight taper at the end, if you can see it, whereas the other ones that we just removed for mounting those various things, they don't. So easy to get mixed up. They're both 10mm, but as you complete a step, group them together, put them in a little plastic container or put them in a bag, however you like. Okay, I've got all those 10mm bolts out. Now we're just going to pull this inverter cover right off. Lifts pretty much straight up and out. Put that somewhere safe. Okay, now we're at the inside of the inverter here. The first thing I'm going to do here is disconnect the main HV plugs. So that's easier to do kind of with the screwdriver to help you pry them out, but they're not too bad. So there's these two. There's 2, top and bottom. If you're worried they might get mixed up, you could write with a marker T and B for top and bottom so you know which one goes where. And then there's 2 gray wiring harnesses just behind there. And 1 black one is the toughest one to get, and it is right down behind there. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect those and then we'll do the next step. Okay, so I already broke the orange ones loose, but pretty simple. You know, you're just wanting to push on this tab here. See right under my thumb. Push that tab and pull back. Okay, that's one. And then the other one likewise. Okay, get those out of your way. And then this one here, the clip on it was a little stubborn for me, but what you might see that it's kind of mounted to a little metal bracket there. So you can pull that off the bracket by just sliding it forward or kind of to the left. And then I found it useful to be able to rotate that so that the clip is on the top. And then, yeah, you're gonna wanna put, like a screwdriver right down in the top and kind of pry out. I'll show you how it comes apart. Okay, this may be helpful to see exactly where the break is. So, there you go. Okay, the slightly larger gray plug back down behind there is an easy one. You can see the big tab right up on top. Gonna need 2 hands, but you press that down and then kind of pull it out. Okay, so that one just slides back. Yeah, good. Then we'll move to this black one in the corner. There you go, you can see it kind of in the bottom left. Yeah, right down in there. And just FYI, the reason I pulled the inverter cover off before doing these harnesses is you just gotta have a little bit more room to get back down in there. I find it easier, but you could also do this step before removing the top. Okay, I got that third black wiring harness disconnected. At this point, what we will next get into is removing the bolts that mount these, the connectors to these terminals. So there's one here and one here. Those are both 10mm. And then on the back side, there's one there and one just on the other side, which you probably won't be able to see. Oh yeah, there it is. And one right there. So there's 10 there. Once those are loose, those these big plugs will just fall well, they're free to fall after we do the terminal bolts as well. So here, here, and here. And then in the back, same 3. At this point, this whole inverter is a little bit loose, so I like to just kind of pull it forward a little bit. So you've got more room to work, particularly getting on those bolts in the back. Sorry, just kidding. Before we do that, there's a couple more plugs in here to undo. There's this one, and this one. And then this, we'll be able to lift out, and we'll get that out of our way. That's inhibiting a little bit of movement for us. Okay, 1, 2, and then this one. Okay, and then this whole thing can kind of move out of the way. Great. And then, as I'm saying now, we can take this whole inverter and kind of slide it forward a little bit to be able to get better access back there. Okay, just again showing how useful that swivel socket adapter is. I'm getting the furthest one back there. There it goes. And then once you break them, I like to just kind of do this and get them out. Also, if you've got a magnet picker-upper tool, those are nice to use in case you drop a bolt. There's a few steps in this job where the bolt is really hard to get to, and they're also useful to, those magnet tools, the ones that telescope, are also useful to kind of help position your bolt or your nut in place as you're reaching in there at a very awkward angle to try to get it on. So, but I say that now because I'm a little bit dubious about touching, getting my fingers too close in any of this. So kind of use the magnet to pick the bolts up and out. Like so. Might also be worth mentioning that these, the 2 10mm bolts mounting this plug on front are slightly longer than the ones in the back, so don't get those mixed up. Okay, so these should be free to pull out. They come out pretty easy. Just give them a little wiggle. Okay, get that up and out of your way. This one, I'm just going to bring it back just a hair. That just pulls it down now. And yeah, at this point, I believe the whole inverter should be free to kind of rotate. I'm going to put the lid back on just so we keep this as clean as it can and, you know, and protected. So I put the lid back on, maybe just finger tight one or two of the bolts in to keep it on there. And then I'm going to lift it up, rotate it a bit, and then set down kind of right in this neighborhood here. There are some, you know, coolant hoses that are attached to it. So just be mindful that you don't put too, you know, you don't pull those too forcefully. You don't put too crazy of a kink on it. They will be fairly kinked when we turn it around, but just don't go crazy pulling on them, because it is still going to be connected with these coolant hoses that we're going to work around. So those stay relatively in place, and then the rest of the unit just kind of rotates this way. Okay, yep, so you see what we did here. We just lifted it up, rotated, set down. You can see these hoses, the coolant hoses we're talking about, they are, you know, they're a little kinked, but they're nothing too crazy here. So those are still in place. So that 10mm right behind where you see the yellow bit of a leaf. There we go. That one there we're gonna need to get. That one's kind of tricky. And then there's a wiring harness on the back of this plug. You can see it back there. It's, you know, kind of right there with the green, you know, coming up from the top. So that one will need to disconnect as well. Okay, and I find it useful to get those 2 bolts that one that was there, and the other one I pointed to back in there, to get those free before trying to get the wiring harness on this pump, because once you get those free, this whole, you know, pump housing kind of comes out, and then you can get to this wiring clip a little bit easier. Okay, and once that wiring harness is free, this whole thing is kind of gonna be the bugger in your, one of the buggers in your way as you're trying to remove the actuator itself. It's just a little wire clip. But I had luck kind of folding it down, you know, and kind of tucking it somewhere under there. If you had to get like a zip tie to just hold it down, the goal is just to get it as low profile as you can, so it's out of your way as we're removing the actuator assembly, which is quite large and clunky because it comes out with this mounting bracket, which is kind of triangle shaped, and it's also got a weight on the bottom, so it's quite heavy, pretty large. The biggest concern is getting it out without messing up these brake lines, and you really have to kind of wiggle it out, small movements, check if it's hung up on any of these brake lines. Just try to be delicate with it, because you wouldn't want to mess the threads up, or the little flares on the end of these brake lines. That could be problematic, so. But we'll get to that. So yeah, for now, you fold this down and out. All this stuff too, you're gonna wanna find a way to kind of get out of your way, secure it out of your way if you have to, you know. But we're just trying to free as much space kind of in this bay now so that we can work on the actuator and then we can pull it out when we get there. Okay, patching in this video retroactively, but one thing I forgot to show is this 10mm bolt. Comes out. And then this bracket, I just kind of rotated up. I left it on this other line, rotated up in another way. Okay, and there's a big electrical switch, electrical connector on top of the brake actuator here. So what you have to do to get this one free is gently pry behind this white part. This white part, actually, let's see if I can get it. It slides forward, so you get under there, pull that, and then that white clip slides forward, and then the plug can go out that way. Okay, I got it started so you can see what I'm talking about here. So this white part slides, so you're gonna pull it back towards you, you know, so it's all the way extended, and then this whole connection can slide out. Next thing we're gonna do is disconnect this here. You're gonna wanna put, you know, a water bottle down here or some kind of catch, because this will drain your brake fluid reservoir when we disconnect this. Not all the way empty, but pretty low. So disconnect here, and then we'll drain into a water bottle or something. And the next thing we're gonna do is start disconnecting the brake lines here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one there on top, which you can see pretty well. And a side note, in another video I showed how to do the upstream O2 sensor, and I was able to do it from below the car and with a pretty crazy reach around the back here. But if you're by chance having that problem, or you want to change it now while you have access, just to make it easier on yourself, that's right down in there. You can see my finger just beyond my fingers pointing to that upstream O2 sensor. So you would need a special socket to get in there, and then it's got you know, there's, follow the wire, but there's a wiring harness right, where am I? Okay, that one there that you can see wiggling. You disconnect that. That's all you need to do to change that. It's known to be a pretty pain in the butt of a job, so while you have access here, it might be a good time to do. Okay, so I've got a bottle down in there, and if you haven't done these little hose clamps before, I just get a pliers on them and kind of wiggle that. Of course, everything's easier to do with two hands. So yeah, you get on there. when you clamp those two ears together, that loosens the clamp, and then with those clamped, you gotta angle it back a little bit. All right, so I've got it started here. So you're gonna take that loose, try to get it right in your water bottle or whatever you have to drain that into. Yeah, I'd say it drains about the size of a small water bottle, so you need something that big to catch it all. Okay, and the best thing for brake lines is a brake line wrench, kind of like this. With that said, so use this when you can. The main concern is rounding over the parts you wrench on those brake lines. You don't want to bugger those up too much. But with that said, I found that this wrench was a little bit hard to get in there in certain scenarios, so I used the combination of this one and just a regular, crescent wrench. Okay, you're gonna need a pretty long extension for this one here, but there is, you can see where it was. That is one of two remaining nuts to mount the bracket, more or less, that this whole actuator sits on. So it's right back here. Then there's another one kind of on the other side. I'll show you how to get in there, but you're gonna remove this relay box and then kind of go in down through here. Okay, the relay box, just two 10mm bolts, one right there and one on the other side of it. Okay, so this is loose, comes out of the way. Let's see if we can get a sight. I can see it, making the camera see it's another chore. There we go, okay. Yeah, right there, where you see where the light just shined. So down there is where we need to get to. So again, with the swivel socket on, it's a lot more doable. So yeah, it'd be kind of coming through something like that. Okay, so I got that broken. Just turn the rest by hand here. And just wanted to show, this is a situation where I'm gonna use this extender magnet because the chances of dropping that little nut back there are high. So I'm gonna, kind of as it's coming really loose and about to fall off, I'm gonna follow this magnet down there and try to catch it as it breaks free so it doesn't drop down. Okay, coming out like so, and that is a 12mm nut. Okay, and when that's done draining, you can get that bottle out of there. Maybe turn this hose upward a little bit so it doesn't drip. Maybe put a little bit of a paper towel in there or something so nothing gets in there. And then there's a 10mm bolt right there, which kind of mounts this 1, 2, 3, 4 brake lines. So you're gonna wanna take that one there. And then there's one, kind of the hardest one to get to and certainly the hardest one to show is back behind there, kind of on the front of this shaft. There's another nut that you need to get to, and that one you also kind of have to come in this way. I don't know if I can get a light on that, but I'll show you kind of the angle I'm at once I get my socket on there. Okay, I said I would. So there it is. It's kind of still not great visibility on there, but there you go. You can see kind of how I have it in there. And maybe when I get the thing out, I'll show you where that nut is so you get a better visual of where it is located on the actuator. Again, that one I'm gonna, and all of these hard to get ones, I'm gonna use the magnet so I don't drop them. Okay, I'm just gonna show you on one of my bad used ones, that nut that we were getting around front. So the actuator is situated in there, more or less something like this. And that 10mm nut, the kind of the hardest one to see or get to, is right on the front there of this front silver cylinder. So kind of you can reach around there, get in there with the socket. Kind of have to feel around with your hands. Hopefully you can reach in there to get the socket on that nut. In my opinion, that's the trickiest one. So. Okay, and just to show you where we're at on brake fluid after draining that tube there, you see we're kind of just above the minimum line. So it doesn't fully drain, but it drains quite a bit. Okay, I'm gonna leave it here for now and come back tomorrow when I get my new part. And yeah, I'm not gonna leave it open overnight because I think the less chance of any contamination getting in those brake lines, the better. So I'm just gonna leave them. I cracked them loose, but they're still, you know, threaded in a little bit. So when I come tomorrow, I'll fully remove those and then get some video of removing the whole actuator assembly and the bracket underneath. Then you gotta, you know, remove the old actuator from the mounting bracket underneath and connect the new actuator to the bracket, and then we're ready to go back in. So. All right, there it is, new actuator from Toyota. There's the part number for the actuator assembly, if you're looking for it. I got this from, well, I ordered it online through Lithia Toyota here in Springfield. I was able to pick up at will call locally, and yeah, it was one of the cheapest prices I could find for it online. So let's open this up and see what's inside. Well, we may get into installing that on this video too. But this is the main part that we're replacing. So there's the actuator. It comes with all the brake, the ports for the brake lines kind of plugged off. And you see this is just the actuator, so we're gonna have to, once we get the other one out, take the old one off of the mounting, the large mounting bracket, and then put this new one on that bracket and go back in the car. So let's get into getting that old one out. All right, let's give it a go. Those brake lines do, you know, there's a bit of fluid dripping from the brake lines. I'm just trying to sop that up as much as I can. And then of course the first thing is to get it off of those two bolts that we removed the two 12mm nuts from. So kind of pull it off of that, and then you can start kind of working it this way and forward. I found when I was doing this before that the brake lines on top in particular are kind of hard to get free from. You'll see that they seat kind of into a little plastic clip that holds them in place, so you want to bump them out of that clip. But even still, as you're working it, you know, those were the ones that probably were most difficult to keep it from getting hung up on. So I got it off of the bolt, and then as I did that and moved forward, pretty quick, it was getting tight on these 4 brake lines up front. So watch those. Okay, so far so good up top. And I'm literally just feeling for any little inch of movement that I can get it kind of over and out. So don't get too greedy with your progress. Just a lot of little wiggles and it'll come. That's another thing I did, is the electrical clip. Tried to turn it upwards and tucked it back so that we don't get brake fluid in there and it doesn't get in our way. Okay, yeah, I just felt a good move there. It was that very top brake line. I was able to, as soon as I got a little bit of movement this way, was able to lift that up and kind of tuck it back behind. So that was stopping me. And this other upper brake line that kind of hooks around, that one fight me a little bit too. I think we're starting to get it. Yeah. Okay, there it is. Yeah. So there's what it looks like now that the actuator has been removed. It wasn't terrible. You saw progress was slow. This brake line here did get a little hung up on it, and I think that bent out slightly. But that one fortunately is easy enough to reach. I think I'll be able to bend it back in. On one video I was watching, they recommended using a small socket around it so you kind of bend the whole line rather than putting a kink in it. So I may try that if I need to when we go to put this one back in. Aside from that, things felt okay. I didn't feel any major snags. So you'll see here's the two on top, if you can. Yeah, so this one kind of hooks around, and that one's in the front. And then the other one way back there was the one that goes straight in the top of the actuator. Those were both tricky to get around. Okay, and one more quick shot showing those brake lines a little bit more clearly. So you have the 1, 2, 3, 4 coming in from the left, and then the one on the top middle, and then the other one you see in the upper right. That one kind of wraps around and mounts to the front. Also, thought it worth mentioning, you know, it's a bit messy with the brake fluid and all. And when I was reading the repair manual, they made it a point often to say not to get the brake fluid on painted surfaces. I guess it can attack the paint, so be careful with that. All right, so we're gonna get the old actuator off of this bracket here. To do that, there are a couple of 10mm nuts, one here and one on the other side in the same spot. And then there's this weight on the bottom. If you can see that. Yeah, this weight kind of like a fin hanging down. That mounts with a couple of larger bolts. I think they're 12. Verify that. Yeah, but that mounts with, there's 3 12mm bolts down on the bottom there. 2 are for the weight itself, and the third one, I believe, mounts into the actuator. So we're gonna go ahead and get all those out. Okay, and that comes right off. There's a few things you may need from the old one. These 2 clips, not sure how well you can see, that held the 2 brake line hoses. There and there, they have a little bracket that they're mounted to that I believe you can take off and transfer onto the new one if the new one didn't come with these little clips to help hold those 2 brake lines. There's one more 10mm, I think it is, or it looks like a 12. One more 12 here to, actually I think that's gonna be fine. I think we can leave that one on, and then we'll install our new actuator. Orient this kind of the way you had it in the car. So this was the back of the car, and this is the orientation of it with the clip up top and the 2 cylinders pointing that way. Your main fluid hose there. So when we put the new one on, we can see exactly how it goes into this bracket. Okay, so we got the new one here, and we're gonna install it on the bracket. I'm hoping this is the one. It does have a couple of kind of rubber, you know, cushions, or maybe it helps with the vibration of it. So you want to make sure those don't fall out. They just kind of plug into the side of the actuator. Anyway, so those kind of go between the bracket and the actuator itself. There's one on the nose that kind of plugs into a male part of the bracket, and then these 2 on the sides that will slide into the slots. It's a bit of a finagle. Okay, I had better luck this way, taking that little cushion off the front and putting it on the post that it needs to go on. Yeah, and then it kind Slides in a little bit. A bit better. Yeah, there we are. Okay. That old one out of the way. There we go. So we've got our two nuts, 10 millimeter on either side of it. And on the bottom. Okay, you gotta get this little other part of the bracket we say we didn't have to remove. We've got to get that to line up with the holes on the bottom. Maybe easier said than done. It looks a little bit off. But let's try it. So there's the, can only go one way because there's this female part in the bottom of this weight that has to interact with the little nub that's sticking out there. So if you're not sure how it goes, as I'm not, you can just put it on there, and then I'll show you which holes it needs to line up with. So the weight orients like that. There we go. And the short one. We have the short one going just through that plate and into the actuator, and then the two long ones going through the weight. I'm hoping it's okay to be rotating this actuator a little bit as I'm working on it. In the box it came standing that way, so I think it's okay. So there we have it. You see the new one is installed to the bracket. Those two holes on the back here and on the other side there are where our, those nuts came off kind of back towards the firewall of the car. And I think it's also worth mentioning, I'm leaving all of these, these little plugs in the ports for the brake lines. I'm leaving those on until I get it in there, just to reduce any risk of any contaminant getting in there and then getting into the brake system. So let's take it back to the car and try to wiggle this thing back in there. So here we go, same as we came out. We're gonna try to just kind of gently, one step at a time, get it back in position there. I did find, it'd be worth mentioning, kind of, as I was pulling it out, I was also kind of rotating it this way a little bit. So I may try to go back in that same way, kind of going in like this, coming out like that. Also worth mentioning, when I was reading the repair manual after doing it for the first time, they did mention you can, in the instruction there, they had you remove a few more of these brake lines from the other end as well. Obviously I was able to do that the first and second times without doing that, so I'm going to continue that way. But it very well might be a good idea to track down the end of some of these brake lines, and if you can remove the whole thing, just to save yourself a little trouble getting hung up on them, and a little bit of risk damaging them. But I'm going to give this a go. Okay, and then at this point, once it's starting to get in there, I kind of feel back with my fingers and try to locate those bolt posts kind of back towards the firewall of the car. And once I can feel those, I know which direction I need to go and how far to go to get this bracket to seat down onto it. Yeah, there's a couple of wiring harnesses kind of in the very back that it was hanging up on. So you know, just little by little. And if you feel anything's blocking your movement, you know, you can feel around and see if you can locate where it's binding and what's stopping you. And that's maybe a little bit more graceful way of doing it than just kind of getting frustrated with it and pushing too hard. Gosh, and even after saying it to the camera, I forgot to remove this this little piece of bracketry, which is to, you know, to mount these little clip mounts for the brake lines. So I was able to do it after the fact. This is my other old piece of junk that I'm just showing for reference. But I'm wondering, now that I say that, it might have made it a little bit easier to get in because it's just less to get hung up on, kind of making the overall shape of the actuator assembly a little smaller. So yeah, who knows, maybe you want to go ahead and do it the way I did it on accident, where you take this off. Well, if you get a new one, it won't come with it on there. Install it and then put this on after the fact. You can kind of reach in there. It's one less thing to get hung up on. Hooray, the new one's in, and now I'm gonna start taking these little plastic plugs out and getting the brake lines on. As I mentioned, I'm a little worried I bent this one slightly out, so I'm gonna try to bend it just back that way, just a hair. I may put a socket over it to do that, get a nice clean bend on it, and yeah, with these I'm gonna start threading them with my fingers always, and kind of as you get it in position, you know, you just want to try to make sure you're going straight into that hole as good as you can. And I found to kind of wiggle the brake line back and forth as you're trying to make progress threading it with your fingers kind of helps, you know, helps it to thread in there and helps lower the risk of cross threading them. So I'm gonna go ahead and start on that. Okay, so here's the idea with the socket. You just want to put it over that line. You can even plug it into the nut there. And then, I'm probably going to use two hands to do this carefully, but yeah, and then you just kind of bend that whole thing in one go. And we just want a little bit of bend. We definitely don't want to kink it. I'm just trying to correct a little bit for how I might have bent it getting it out. Oh, there it went. It was actually a little bit, there's more down here that it kind of twisted. So yeah, I was able to feel that. Okay, and one trick that as I was researching how to do the brake lines, because I've not done this very much, that I found to help them seat properly is you can tighten and then kind of back off a short ways, then tighten a little more and then back off a short ways. You don't want to go crazy tight where you're gonna risk stripping them, but you definitely want to get them good and snug so nothing's gonna leak. Of course, if you can do the final tightening with a brake line wrench like this, that's a better idea. There were certain spots where the angle that just doesn't work so well, and I had to use just a regular wrench. But just make sure you don't round over the part that you wrench on here. And I did every one up until the last one. So I'm gonna leave that one undone for a moment here. I'm gonna reconnect this hose to there, and then I'm gonna put some more brake fluid in my reservoir, and you'll watch it go down. You know, last time I've done this, you know, you fill it up to max, and you'll kind of watch it go down about halfway as the actuator fills up. So that, and then I top off again. And the reason for doing it in that order, or rather the reason for leaving that last brake line up top undone until after we fill the reservoir is hoping that it's going to push the air out, up and out. You will need a scan tool that has the capability of doing an ABS brake bleed. The reason for that is it has to open certain solenoids, it has to activate certain solenoids while you're doing the brake bleed process. And there's, as far as I understand, there's really not a way to do that manually. So you either have to get it done at a shop that has a scan tool like that, or have to get your own. I got a X tool off of Amazon for about 500 bucks, and I'll show you that when we get there. Okay, this is not going to be very easy to explain, but you remember this nut was the one at the 10 millimeter nut, kind of on the very nose of this whole actuator assembly. That was probably the hardest one to get to. One, the way I think the way I did it before to get it back in was to go up through here and then kind of reach up and around towards the front. I found that a lot easier than kind of going in this way like we did to get it loose. I will go in that way to tighten it fully, but I'm going to get it started with my fingers by reaching down through here. And then there's also a little plate that kind of has like a nub on it, a male end that fits into a little hole in the actuator, somewhere on that actuator assembly or bracket. And so you kind of got to slide that around to pop that plate back in. And then this nut goes on the top to hold it in place once it seats, but you'll feel it when it really seats in there. All right, I've got some DOT3 brake fluid here. And we're gonna go ahead and fill this reservoir up. So I'm gonna go up to max and then just show you how, you can see it dropping down there. That means our actuator's filling up. I still left that top brake line off for the time being. I'm gonna get this full and to a point where the level is holding. And then we'll tighten that top one down and give myself just a little more because we are gonna end up bleeding the brakes after all this. So there we go. Okay, so of course that top one's the hardest to get to. And what we wanna make sure is that the brake line is going in, square into the top of the hole, or perpendicular to the top plane of the actuator there, otherwise you risk cross-threading. So to do that, this one, just kind of show you. Now be really gentle as you do this. You don't want to pry heavily on a brake line, but I kind of put my screwdriver in behind that line a little bit further back, and it was just kind of wiggling the screwdriver a little bit, putting a little bit of pressure to pull it this way, to pull it that way, as I had my other finger on that brake line was tightening down, and kind of a combination of wiggling it and tightening it with my fingers to start making progress on that thread and to be sure that I wasn't cross-threading it. Okay, so yeah, we kind of just start doing reverse order of what we did to take it out. I'm gonna get the electrical plug back in here. So, just I can show that. Again, to do that, you had to start with this white thing, this white tab pulled out, and then you're gonna line it up, get it on there, and then that white tab really does the rest of the job, fixing it on there. Next, this bracket here comes back down and in. Okay, there was a 10mm bolt there. This pump here. Remember we had the electrical back on the end there. I'm trying to get that. Yeah, it goes with the tab. If you can see that. Tab facing away from you. Yeah, click it in. And then this, as you'll remember, the bracket for that pump had two 10mm bolts. One here, and the other one right down in there that you have to get to line up with the, the bracket of the actuator. Okay, so the one 12mm bolt here to remount the bracket for the actuator, and then on my magnet I've got that other 12mm nut that goes back down behind everything and attaches the bracket to that kind of firewall area of the car. Yeah, that did it. have to get your long socket back out and get back in there. Okay, and we're about ready to rotate this inverter back into place there. Yep, we can do that. What we want to make sure is that these three, the black one that was over here, the large gray one that was on bottom, and this smaller gray one that was on top. Make sure those are all accessible and free, not hung up on anything. That's a good point, that plugs into there. Okay. So we'll be able to reach these and plug them into the back of the inverter when we get in position. Okay, we'll give this a shot. Be mindful that the back of this inverter here, you don't want to force it into the brake lines. It's got to fit in there a certain way, and if you're not careful with the way you move it, you might crash it right into those brake lines. So. Get those things out of my way. Okay, we're just going to rotate it right back down in. See if we'll hang it up on anything. Yeah, tight fit, but we're good. So now we'll just continue, reverse of what we did. We'll take the cover back off. We'll get this main plug back in, get the other one on this side back in. Our two main orange plugs in the back side. Those, the black and the two gray wiring harnesses behind that we pointed out. This hooked up and dropped back in. We'll reconnect, remount. There was that little leader, this friend. So that will remount there. Okay, and then the 3 10mm terminal bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the back. Okay, got those. And while we still have a little bit of kind of wiggle room here, I'm going to get these three back here, which are kind of hard to get to otherwise. Okay, that top one, kind of on the bracket. Okay, that large gray one may not reach. Let's see about this black one down there. Yeah, that one reaches just fine, so we'll get the large gray one when we push it back in a little bit. Okay, I got the large gray one on the bottom started. There it clicks in. Let's wait on those. Get these three back in. 1, 2. There we go. And then this, as you remember, seat's kind of on that. There we go. Yeah, down in there. Okay. And I think we're about ready to get the cover back on. We could do these orange plugs back here. Do the bottom first, otherwise it's kind of hard to get to. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, got that. Okay, so now we'll get the cover back on. Can mount this relay box back up for good measure. We can remount this to there, right, and plug that back in. And don't forget a little green clip that goes in there. And yeah, and we'll get the bleeder. This little guy, I'll get that mounted back in there. Okay, got all that. Now your mounting bolts for the inverter. There's 3. These I think were 12. And as you remember, the 3rd one comes back behind there, down in there. A little bit hard to get to. Okay, and this green clip has a front and a back. So you can see that little tab up top is kind of flush with the back and recessed from the front. So just help orient it that way as we go back in. All right, the last step is just to get this cover here back on. There we go. Kind of tucks down under there. Yeah. And a fair few of my clips are broken, but this is the idea, is that you just put it back in there, push it down. Okay, and I don't expect you're gonna see anything other than a mess of wires here, but that blue plug right there, we're gonna, and you can also further find it because it's got these kind of silver braided protectors on it. So there's one nut, you just kind of gotta follow this line up to where it mounts. Okay, so now this is important. Before we reconnect the 12-volt battery or the HV battery, we're going to do a manual bleed of the brakes. The reason for this is when you reconnect the power, that actuator pump is going to try to run, and we want to get as much air out of that as we can before we put power to it. Otherwise, that air could damage the pump, or at very least would be very difficult to get out. So we come in, and won't spend a lot of time on this as there's plenty of videos bleeding brakes, but for this first one, you're just going to want to pump the brake pedal 15 to 20 times. And if you have a helper, they can hold the pedal down. Otherwise, they sell brake depressors, or I just use a woodworking clamp like this and just put one in on the pedal. Yeah. And the other end, kind of behind the steering wheel, works okay for me. Okay. And then I'm going to come around. I believe in the procedure, the front right comes first and then the front left. I already did the front right. So I'm just showing you here. I've got, there's a little bleeder on the back of your caliper. You take, there's a little cover that looks like this. You pop that off. And then you've got this little bleeder valve. It's a 8mm wrench. I like to put the wrench on first, and then you connect some tubing here. I've heard aquarium hose works. Otherwise, they sell little bleeder kits at auto parts stores. That's what this is a part of, and I have it run into just a bottle there. And this is just from all of my past attempts. I've collected quite a bit of brake fluid by now, but and then with that pedal depressed, you're gonna crack the bleeder valve. Okay, and kind of when the pedal goes to the floor, you're gonna tighten it back up. And you're looking for air bubbles coming through this line. I got quite a few out, which I was happy about. And that's the idea with brake bleeding. So we're doing it manually here, and then once we do that to a point where the brakes are feeling good and we're not getting air bubbles out, we're going to come in with and do the ABS ABS system brake bleed with a scan tool. So I'll walk you through that process too. Okay, here's the front right. A little bit dark in there, but I've got my wrench in there. Put the hose on. Crack that open for a minute. See if we get any air bubbles. Oh yeah, there's a good bubble that came through there. Great. Okay, and then close it back up and repeat until we're not seeing any air and the brakes feel pretty good. Just a clearer view of how I have that clamp oriented so that it's keeping the brake pedal depressed while I go around and bleed the bleeder valve. Okay, so I'm just gonna crack that open. Yep, heard it come through on that one. And if you look, there you go, see that? That's what we're looking to get out of there. You can see those bubbles in the line. So we're gonna keep doing this until we're not seeing any more bubbles. And that's pretty dramatic. Sometimes the bubbles are smaller and fewer, but yeah, that's the air in there that we're bleeding out. Okay, I'm about ready to plug the 12-volt battery and the HV battery back in. But first what I'm going to do is come to this relay box, fuse box here, and pull the two ABS motor relays out. So it's these two blue ones, this one and this one here. If you're looking here, ABS motor 2 and ABS motor 1. Okay, and to the 12 volt, you can plug this back in. At this point, I'm just really hoping my error code has gone away. Okay. Yeah, there's that beep. Okay. And the hybrid battery. So again, in, pull the lever up, and then the last step is clicking that down. Down, okay. Also thought to mention, I'm going to hook a battery charger up on my 12 volt here for this next step. It can take quite a while, and as that actuator pump is running, it can drain your 12 volt pretty quick, especially if because you have to keep the ignition on to the car the whole time you're doing this. So I'm just going to hook up this battery charger. I had one 12 volt die on me already, and one new one that I had just put in had it die on me by leaving this hooked up as my ABS actuator motor kept running. Okay, this is the one I got from Harbor Freight. Just charge, leave it on auto, so in theory it's going to kick on if that 12 volt gets low. Okay, so I've got my scan tool plugged in right here under the steering wheel, and I have to do ignition on. So push the power button twice. That beeping is an alarm from the brake system. I'm hoping it's just telling me that the relays are out. But I'm a little nervous because that's the same beeping I was hearing when I had the error code I've been chasing this whole time. Anyway, so we're coming here to the scan tool. For mine, you go to special function, and then ABS bleeding here, Toyota. Okay, North America, automatic detection, 2006 is my car with a smart key. Okay. Let's just see, let's hold our breath here. Read trouble code. Low pressure of accumulator. So that's the same code I've had this whole time, even though now I've installed a brand new part. Let's try clearing that. Yeah, still having that same problem. Well, that's a bummer. Okay, so we're gonna do the brake bleed here, air bleeding. Okay, wants the vehicle to be stopped, parking brake on, which I've got, ignition switch on, which I've got. I've got a setting here that says the actuator has been removed. Okay, it says to turn the ignition off, remove the 2 relays, which we did for the ABS. Ignition switch on, which we've done. Okay. So first step is the front right to bleed it the way we had demonstrated. So I'm going to do that until I don't see any more air coming through. A side note here, if you are doing this procedure with a scan tool like this and you know it all of a sudden kicks you out, says something about, you know, process failed, check vehicle conditions. In my experience, that was happening when my 12-volt battery was running down. So it hasn't happened since I've had the charger while I'm doing this. So that might be the answer. If your scan tool isn't letting you go into the process or it's kicking you out halfway through, I would check your 12-volt battery. Okay, I did the front right, and the right is passenger side for the record, so front passenger side. 3 times, I wasn't getting any air, so I'm going to move on. Now the front left, we'll do the same thing. Okay, I did the front left, front driver's side 3 times, again wasn't getting any air, so I'm going to move on. Okay, and then on the next screen it has me press the brake pedal 30 times in 30 seconds. So 1 time per second. And you can see it's activating different solenoids while I'm doing that. So this is the part where you definitely need the scan tool that has this capability. Okay, and then it has me turn the ignition off and wait for 2 minutes. And then I'll install the relays again, turn the ignition switch back on, and then it's going to have me do the rears. Okay, we're going to put those 2 relays back in. Okay. And an important note on that last step. Here it says, do not push on the brake pedal or open and close the doors while we were waiting for that 2 minutes before we reinstalled the relays. Okay, so we've done that. Ignition back on. Okay, now we connect to the rear left, so rear driver side, and we're going to bleed that one. That chattering sound you just heard, that's the actuator working. Hey, I think we're getting some progress. When I cracked that rear left bleeder open with the brake pedal depressed, I heard the actuator kicking on as I hadn't before, and also that buzzing, that terrible buzzing sound of the brake alarm is now not any longer happening even when I press the brake pedal. So that's a huge improvement. Starting to get a good feeling about this. We're going to go to the next step, and you could probably guess it's going to have us move to the right rear, so passenger side rear. Okay, and what I noticed on that one, I bled it 3 times. I did both of the rears 3 times. Didn't really see any bubbles on either side any of those times. But what I noticed is that when I crack the bleeder open, I hear that buzzing alarm. So this time I think now it's telling us, hey, your brake system's open, you're leaking fluid, something like this. But it's only coming on when I crack the bleeder. So I take that as a good sign of progress. Okay, now we're going to bleed the front left, and it's going to activate some other solenoids for 10 seconds. So I think these are just bad instructions, because I don't think you're ever supposed to open the bleeder without having the brake pedal depressed, or else you're going to let air in. So I'm going to do that. I've been through this a fair number of times, and that's my conclusion. Maybe I'm wrong, but... Okay, and after that last step, I'm getting the buzzing again, and I'm seeing this brake fluid level low code. And that last step did flush out a lot of brake fluid through the front left when I cracked that open and waited 10 seconds. So now my brake fluid reservoir is showing minimum. I'm going to top it off and see if that top coat at least doesn't go away. Okay, so I was at minimum. I just put some in, it went up and then it sunk down again, similar to how it did when we were first filling up the actuator. So I'm not sure exactly what that last step did, but it seems to have flushed out a lot of fluid. Okay. Yeah, now it seems to be maintaining. Okay, and when I come back in and turn my ignition on, I'm not getting that beeping anymore, so I'm hoping that was just the brake fluid level low code buzzing me. I'm going to clear trouble codes, see if we took care of them. I'm not hearing any buzzing, that's a good sign. No trouble code, so we got that low accumulator pressure to go away. That was the big one. I'm celebrating right now. Because really, up until this very minute, I was still thinking, you know, what if it's something else? What if I've now put in 3 different actuators chasing that code and it was something else? But because it was hard to believe that I was sent 2 bad used ones that I had purchased off of eBay. But it just goes to show you can't always trust the quality of those. They often have no way of testing them because the people selling them are, you know, wrecking lots that get the vehicle wrecked and then they sell it for parts. So they don't know. Oh. Shit. Okay, I just ran through the ABS bleed again, and process was much the same, but now I just cleared the code again, and now it's reading no trouble codes. The brakes feel really tight. Not hearing that beeping come back on, so I'm hoping we got it. So to learn from that, you may have to do the ABS bleed procedure more than once. I did get a little bit more air out when I went through the second time, so I'm hoping that what the problem was, you know, there was a little bubble that passed through the system, and that caused a problem with the actuator for a moment. Here's 3 very expensive pieces of junk here. This is the original. This was my first attempt at replacing. This was the second attempt at replacing that the eBay seller sent me on warranty as a replacement for the first one being bad. It was hard for me to believe that both of these were bad. I thought, you know, there was a good chance it might be something else. But then again, everywhere I asked, if you're getting that low accumulator pressure code, it pretty much points only to your actuator. So turns out it was just a case of bad luck, if you will. These were indeed both bad. When I got the new one in, was able to successfully do the ABS bleed. I had to do it twice, but things feel good. Error code is gone. Brakes feel good. I'll call it fixed. All right. Well, I just test drove my car here to work. Got all my tools in the back, and so far so good. All of the lights have remained off. The error code didn't come back. The brakes feel really good. So I think we took care of it.